The Curse of the Vampire, from minus 1163 to 1152 IC. Nagash had not been idle and learned much about the art of necromancy and animating the dead during his time within NAGASH'S, conceiving of a mad and deadly scheme that would turn the entire world into a necropolis filled only by the unquiet dead, where no action would be performed, no deed done save when he willed it. Nagash would be the lord over it all. It was no coincidence that the vampires came across Nagash. Through his agent Vasoran, Nagash had manipulated them from the beginning and lent them his magical aid from afar during the siege of Lahmia. When Neferata learned the full extent of Vasoran's manipulation, she was furious. Even more so than after Nagash's decision to pass her over and offer his distant relative, Vashanesh, the position as commander of his legions. Nagash had crafted a ring that would allow the vampire who wore it to return from the dead time and again. But through that ring, Nagash would be able to control all of vampire kind. Vashanesh foolishly accepted the ring, and at Nagash's command, the vampires led his undead army. The first step on Nagash's road to utter dominion was the elimination of his former homeland, Nehekara, for he wished to fulfill the bitter vengeance he vowed upon the priest kings for what they had done to him in the distant past. At his command, the vampires led his legions to war. On ships made of fused bone, the undead horde made its way from the Sour Sea down what future generations would call the Straits of Nagash, and finally back into the bitter sea of Nehekara's shores. The undead legions made landfall within the ruined ports of Lahmia and surged towards the priest king's domains, the exiled vampires spearheading the assault. However, Nagash had seriously underestimated his former countrymen. In the time of his absence, the lands of the Great Vitae River had become a mighty empire ruled by a single priest king, known by his people as Al-Khadizar the Conqueror. Al-Khadizar was the greatest general of his age, and his empire was at the zenith of its power. When the undead came, they found themselves opposed by a massive, unified and highly marshaled grand army consisting of warriors, legions of chariots, and hordes of cavalry. Moreover, the enchanters of the Great Kingdom had made progress in the arts of magic, particularly in the creation of animated war constructs. No easy victory was possible against them. Although at first the vampires were eager to serve as Nagash's lieutenants to exact revenge on Al-Khadizar and regain Lahmia, it became apparent their survival was irrelevant to Nagash. He hurled them carelessly against the enemy as he would his mindless undead troops, and he cared not for rebuilding Lahmia. Instead, he sought to destroy all of Nehekara. Bound by the power of the ring Vashanesh wore, they were unable to disobey Nagash or even his second-in-command, Arkan the Black. The ensuing wars stained the sands of Nehekara red for many years. The vampires were mighty sorcerers and fell warriors, and they were determined to reclaim their kingdom. Wherever they appeared, terror and dread came upon the enemy, and yet the vampires, for all their claims of power and immortality, could still be cast down to the cold furrow of death. The war raged for a decade. At first, the legions of the undead had the upper hand. Then, the armies of Al-Khadizar struck back with displays of tactical genius. Finally, Vashanesh concocted an ingenious solution to the problem of NAGASH'S enslavement. Suspecting the control Nagash exerted relied on a vampire wearing the ring and believing the great necromancer's assurances that it would return him from the grave. Vashanesh allowed Al-Khadizar to cut him down at the height of a battle. The vampires were freed from their control, and only the Soran remained. The others scattered and returned to the fortress of Nagash'S. So great was Nagash's rage that he cursed his vampiric captains, making all those bearing their blood unable to bear the rays of the sun. Ever afterwards, they would know constant pain from their unforgiving master, as their howling cries would carry the knowledge of their misery to all men. The Soran stayed by Nagash's side, whilst he cursed and ranted at the fickleness of vampires. The remaining vampires fled Nagash'S by night, dispersing in all directions to confuse pursuers. Even after Nagash's death at the hands of Al-Khadizar, the vampires bore his curse. Thus, the first vampires disappeared across the world, founding their own bloodthirsty dynasties that would endure and grow through the centuries, terrorizing the living to the present day.